step right up to infidelity. Tales to kick things off, we'd appreciate it if you like this video and subscribe to our channel. In that brief amount of time, you can inspire us to write more stories with that out of the way. Let's begin the story, and I hope you like the video. I never imagined I would find myself here sharing my story with the world, but that's just the way life is. I thought my marriage was ideal for a very long time. My name is Rhea. Daniel, my husband, was an incredibly generous and diligent man who did his best to support our family, even though our marriage hadn't been as intense as it once was. I loved him very much after nearly a decade of marriage, but I could feel a shift happening on the inside. A sense of dwindling vitality washed over me, perhaps as a result of the inevitable passage of time, the weariness of balancing job and home responsibilities, or some other factor. I told myself that every marriage goes through rough patch and that my restlessness was normal, but I still couldn't shake it. I joined a gym, and that was the beginning. I just wanted to get in better shape and felt like I needed more energy, so I made the decision. I brought up the idea, and Daniel was totally on board. Because he had always told me to look after myself, I even got his assistance in choosing a gym that was relatively close to our home. Meeting Lucas took place there. From our first encounter, I could tell that Lucas, the gym's head trainer, was unique. His genuine concern for his clients set him apart from the average fitness instructor. I was frightened and self-conscious when I initially entered the gym, but he put me at ease. Feel free to make mistakes. There's no need to be flawless from the start, he assured me with a smile. Keep moving forward, not aim for perfection. His remarks lingered in my mind. It had been quite some time since I had been spoken to by someone so genuine and kind. I had gotten into a rut with Danielle's and my daily routines, and then out of nowhere there was someone who made me feel noticed. In the beginning, all of our communications were businesslike. He helped me with my exercises, made sure I was doing them correctly, and kept me going when I felt like quitting. However, as time went on, our discussions became more in-depth, and I began to eagerly anticipate our meetings. We discussed aspirations, goals, and the meaning of life. It came to my attention that he had competed at the national level prior to his career being cut short by an injury. Finding a new purpose and starting over were both challenges he discussed. Surprisingly, I could relate to that. Like you, I felt like a piece of my identity had slipped away over the years. Along the way, the once ambitious, carefree, and vibrant girl had diminished. Arian and I sat on the outside benches of the gym one night drinking water after a particularly strenuous session. You seem different today, he remarked, his eyes fixed on me before responding. I was hesitant. He nodded in agreement as I explained how sometimes I feel trapped, as if I'm reliving the same day. People can get that way due to routine, but you're doing something about it. Me, the first step in getting out of it is coming here and pushing yourself. I could feel the resonance of his remarks. The focus shifted from mere physical fitness to the rediscovery of a lost aspect of my identity. My physical strength increased as the weeks went by, but that wasn't the only thing that occurred. I felt lighter and began to smile more frequently. Emotional changes were occurring alongside the physical ones, and the epicenter of that transformation was Arian. Outside of the gym, I couldn't help but think about him. Everything about him, his words, his encouragement, and his mere presence stayed with me. I rationalized it by telling myself he was only a friend and an inspiration, and that it wouldn't hurt him. It was more than that, though, as I knew in my heart I had an overwhelming urge to speak to him and confide in him. One day following a particularly strenuous training session, shall we get a cup of coffee on a whim? I inquired. He nodded, appearing surprised. Of course, I'll just wrap up here at a little cafe close to the gym. I finally felt comfortable enough to open up in a way that had been bottled up for years. I spilled the beans to him about my marriage, the superficial details, and all, including the emotional distance and loneliness I was experiencing. Daniel wasn't a terrible spouse, so I refrained from painting him that way. We had evolved from being partners into two individuals leading separate lives. Even though he was a decent man, never once did Arian interrupt or pass judgment as he listened carefully. Mira, you deserve to feel alive. That was all he said when I was done. For a long time after that night, those words rang in my head. Have I done it? I returned home that evening and remained wide awake, fixated on the ceiling. Sleeping next to me Daniel had no idea the tempest was brewing inside of me. I needed to tell him how I really felt, but I was at a loss as to how to start our conversation. Attempting to convince myself that I was merely enthralled by the novelty of the situation, I attempted to distance myself from Aaron. Over the following several days. I attempted to put some distance between us, but it only made me miss our talks, our laughter, and the way he saw me after that. The turning point arrived. The gym was nearly deserted on this rainy evening. A short blackout occurred right after I finished my session. We were alone in the dimly lit room with the sound of rain on the windows as our only companions for the first time. I noticed the internal struggle in Aaron's eyes as I glanced at him. He began, but I cut him off. I know, I whispered. The air between us was heavy with unspoken words. As we stood there silently, I realized then that I had arrived at a crossroads. I would love to claim that decision was the correct one right away, though it may seem that way at times. Thus my narrative formally commenced. I had the sensation of balancing on a tightrope for days following that incident at the gym. An overwhelming sense of desire, along with competing feelings of shame, anticipation, and dread, occupied my thoughts. Nothing had transpired, I told myself over and over. All we had was a brief moment of understanding in my heart, though I knew it to be true emotionally, not physically. I had crossed a boundary. As always, Daniel was in the dark. Work kept him busy, and when he got home he was exhausted and still fixated on the same old habits that had occupied our lives for so long. My attempt at normalcy was thwarted. I could feel my true self shifting. I was more fit and easily sidetracked, even though we never spoke outside of the gym. I found myself checking my phone to see if Lucas had texted. Then, one night, Daniel casually brought up the fact that he had to travel the following weekend for work. He exclaimed, "It's a conference," as he hardly lifted his eyes from his laptop. "I will not be available for 3 days," encouraging a smile. I gave a nod. "Are you asking if I should bring anything for you to pack?" His body language conveyed his disapproval. "No, it's only a brief journey." It ended there, just a statement of fact, no room for interpretation or feeling. Normally, I would have gotten used to it by now, but right then my chest hurt. We used to be able to talk about anything and everything for hours on end. Suddenly, being apart for even a weekend was meaningless. My regular routine included a trip to the gym on the day Daniel departed, but I felt like something was off. I stood before Lucas after my session, perhaps because of the weight of everything I had been feeling, or because I knew I would be alone for the next few days. He picked up on the fact that I was unsure of my words. "Are you all right?" Before finally nodding, I paused. "Yes," merely pondering. After a brief examination, he rubbed his hands together on a towel. He urged her to go on. "Going for a stroll sounds good to me." My mind was already made up. Leaving the gym, we strolled over to the park that was close by. The sky was a kaleidoscope of pinks and oranges, and it was a peaceful evening. The air was crisp with a voice barely audible above a whisper. I confess that I feel as though I'm slipping away for a considerable amount of time. Lucas remained silent. He then let out a long sigh. "Keep going." "Me, simply put, you are looking for something that has been absent from your life and not formed in my chest as a result of his remarks. However, what if my search criteria are incorrect?" He halted his steps and pivoted to meet my gaze. "Wanting to be happy isn't bad, is it?" To be honest, I was stumped as we watched the sunset. We sat on a bench. I lost track of time because we were just chatting the whole time concerning matters of the heart, aspirations, and all that we had forsaken throughout our lives. Working with him was a breeze. We simply understood that we were two individuals who had discovered comfort in one another's presence. There were no demands or anticipations. It became chilly. At one point, Lucas tossed off his jacket and threw it over my shoulders as I quivered a little. It was a simple act, but it made me feel loved in a way that the fabric couldn't have imagined. "I don't want to make things complicated for you," he whispered to me. I met his gaze and beheld the worrying on his face. He wasn't trying to force me or steer me into anything I wasn't prepared for. The option was his to offer. I was terrified of that more than anything else because I had no idea which option to choose. That night I felt more torn than before and went home. When Daniel phoned to see how I was doing, I pretended everything was fine. That aside, I was lost In thought, I began to seek out Lucas more frequently during the subsequent days. I didn't want to do anything wrong, I just wanted to be alive again, and he gave me that every time we went for a walk or had a conversation. I felt myself becoming more and more disconnected from my previous life. Then Lucas asked me a question that altered the course of events. On the final day before Daniel was due to return, do you feel content me? Even though it was a very basic question, it seemed like everything depended on the answer. I tried to respond, but nothing came out of my mouth. I was at a loss for words, and maybe that was the main issue. The whole time I stayed up all night that night, fixated on the ceiling and thinking about Lucas's question, do you feel content me? The question was simple enough to answer, but the stillness within me made it difficult. After a long and tiring journey, Daniel returned home the following evening. During our embrace, he informed me about his meetings and planted a kiss on my forehead, smiling and nodding. I listened. On the inside, though, I was a complete outsider in my own house. A choice had to be made, and I knew it. Living in such a precarious state, caught between the life I had created and the emotions that had rocked me to my very being, was becoming intolerable. As a result, I surprised myself the following morning whether it was okay with you. I wanted to speak with Daniel. He appeared taken aback, perhaps even a touch anxious. Without a doubt, he stated, putting down his phone. What's the matter? Looking for the correct expression, I paused. In your opinion, are we happy? His forehead wrinkled. Can you explain? I inhaled deeply. I mean, have you ever felt that we've lost ground, as if nothing is happening? Are we? He remained silent for an extended period. He let out a deep breath. After that, marriage isn't always a thrilling adventure. We're long-term friends. Everything is subject to change. We aren't sad about it though, but do we feel content? I shoved. He scowled as though perplexed by my question. I was under the impression that we were all ready. Then I understood the true issue. For some time now, Daniel and I had been completely separate realities. His perception of our life was that it was steady and predictable. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, that I could no longer turn a blind eye to. He was unaware that I knew about Lucas. The point was lost on that. I realized I couldn't continue acting as if everything was all right when I really knew it wasn't, and that was the turning point. Subtly, I mentioned that I believe we should determine our desires. Why? Because I would hate to look back in 10 years and see that we were merely roommates rather than partners in life. Daniel stared at me intently for quite some time. Something flickered in his eyes which I hadn't seen in years. The emotions like dread, melancholy, and possibly even renown. He also acknowledged that he did not desire that we hadn't had such an open and frank discussion in years. It was the start of a journey neither of us had anticipated. We attempted communication in the days that ensued, actually have a conversation, walking, cooking, and even reminiscing about our marriage's early days became regular occurrences. For us, there was no miracle cure, and the uncertainties persisted even after that. It was a beginning though. Regarding Lucas, I decided on my final visit to the gym. I saw him there as always. Even before I said a word, he could tell I had made up my mind. I told him I couldn't do it. He gave a subtle, not a subtle, smile playing on his lips. Sure, I am aware. To be completely honest, I have no regrets about meeting you. Because of you, I now see things that I had been ignoring for far too long. However, I must first get my life in order before I'm able to make any additional errors. You should be happy, Maria, he told her. And I actually believed it for the very first time, knowing that I had made the right choice for myself. I left that day, I alone, not Daniel or Lucas, because being happy isn't dependent on your companions. Discovering inner peace is the first step. An affair is not the subject of my story. It's about waking up and deciding you don't have time to coast through life. Leaving isn't always the hardest part. It means deciding to stay and stand up for what you believe in.